Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Take Two. We are talking to the Congressional District 2 candidates as we get closer to the race. And this is inching up on us. Joining us today is Bruce Hough. Thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here, Heidi.
So as we head into the primary, this is a three-person race, out campaigning fully every day, I'm assuming?
Every day, every minute, absolutely. All across the state, all across the Congressional District, from north to south. We have 40% of the state geographically in this congressional district.
It is a large district, and we'll get to my questions in a second, but I'm sure you're out there talking to people about what matters to them. What's the number one thing you're hearing from voters?
I think the number one thing really is the economy. It's the old kitchen table issue, right? It's, inflation is up, interest rates are up, energy prices are up. And what do? We are a family that's on a budget. We aren't getting pay increases to match what's happening in the economy. So how do we make ends meet?
So if you were to go and wave your magic wand or use your congressional seat if you were elected, what would be something that Congress could actually do to make a difference and try to roll back some of these prices that people are seeing, how much we're paying at the pump?
And really, a couple of things can happen here. The only reason energy prices are up is because the president used executive orders to change the way energy was going to be delivered in this country. And as a consequence, we've more than doubled energy prices. The Congress actually has all the power. It is the power of the purse. It is the ability to fund and defund. It is also the power to take away certain executive powers that the president had and has used to the detriment not just of this country but specifically of this state. A good example is setting up monuments on the whim that actually have an impact on our state even though the monument is outside the state.
So when we're talking about energy prices, some of these monuments, when they come in, I think a lot of people support them overall, but sometimes it does clamp down on sometimes drilling, oil, fracking, some of those things that happen. Is that something that we should be considering when we're talking about these areas, or are there other ways to make sure that our fuel prices and our energy prices remain at a point where we can pay for them and also deliver what we need to?
Look, land in this country is intended to have multiple uses. And that's part of the charter of the Bureau of Land Management, in fact. And so we are supposed to be able to extract, to be able to graze, to ranch, to farm and have recreation on these properties. So to say all of a sudden that we can't get uranium out of the Arizona Strip, which is critical to future energy resources, or even hunt, trophy mule deer on that strip. You're changing its use from a multiple use to locking it up for future generations. And in grazing, as an example, when you lock up grazing land, you're not allowing the land to be regenerated from an agricultural standpoint. It just becomes fallow and becomes a fire hazard like many of our forests have become because we don't manage them in the best possible way.
What is the future of energy? Right now we're paying more than $4 a gallon of gas at the pump. There's a lot of encouragement for people to drive electric cars, but I don't know that our electric grid is to the point where it could support all of us doing that. What is the future in your mind that we need to be putting our money into?
Well, energy is an all of the above solution. So it's anything that works, whether it's nuclear, wind, solar, etc. But let's don't forget that an electric car, as fun as they are to drive, probably has about 1.5 times the carbon footprint of a normal internal combustion engine because you have to mine the minerals for the batteries. You have to plug into the grid, which is probably coal-fired energy. So we're not saving the planet with electric cars. Let's just not take that position. If you want to drive an electric car, fine, do it.
Helps air quality.
It can in that regard, but it's nominal compared to the benefits. Like I said, the carbon footprint is much larger. So let's don't claim that as a solution. It's a nice car, go ahead and drive them. But we have to do an all of the above. But the first thing we have to do is we have to restrict the president's executive order powers. There is no reason, zero reason, that we cannot be not only energy independent, but energy dominant. We should be a net exporter of power, especially to places like Europe, who depend on foreign enemies for energy. And we could help them get out of that bind by getting back to our policies of allowing for energy development within this country. And we have plenty. We have a lot of energy to go around.
Some of our energy worries and woes started to happen when the invasion of Ukraine happened, and we're a long time into this at this point. There's a lot of funding going to Ukraine. Where do you stand in that regard?
With Ukraine?
Yeah, and Congress funding.
Sure.
I don't know if you'd call it the war in Ukraine at this point or supporting what's happening there,
Well,
but should Congress be sending more money? Is it in our interest here in the U.S.? Where do you see us going?
Well, first of all, any war is horrific. We are seeing a tragic loss of life on all sides, Ukrainian and Russian, and it is devastating the country of Ukraine. It is so devastating that we need to find a solution to this. And one of the things that we have to focus on is what is the exit strategy here? As far as the U.S., never boots on the ground, never flying our aircraft over the war regions or the sovereign nations. And let's get NATO to step up. They've been obligated, and they've obligated themselves to do a 2% of GDP military spend, and only a third of the NATO nations are actually doing that. And they need to step up. This is really a security issue for Europe, especially. And yes, the U.S. has a role, but we should not be the lead in this. We should be in a support vein.
But you support the funding that's going to Ukraine right now.
What's been spent, look, what I don't support is not having complete transparency, not having very specific details on why and where we're spending money. There are some armaments that we give them, and I know we're giving them actually older armaments in general, but that isn't an excuse. We need to be very transparent. There's still a lot of corruption in that country, and we need to be very, very strict on how we help in that regard, and it should be primarily through NATO allies, letting them take the lead on that.
Moving back home here, a lot of people are talking about money that's going out of our country and where we need to spend it here. The U.S. border continues to be an issue with every presidency. DACA hasn't been solved. Nobody's figured out the border or how to make rules in place. What would you do to secure the border and make changes that would maybe please both sides? Because I think when you listen to both sides, there is some agreement. No one ever wants to sit down and hash it out in Congress, but there does seem to be some agreement in there.
Well, if you look at the past Republican administration versus today, they were getting it figured out. They were keeping people from crossing the border by the millions. We've had 3.5 million new illegal entrants into this country since this administration has taken place. But we can do some very simple, very quick things. Number one, we need to announce to the entire southern border world that if you're coming here for asylum, that you must come through a port of entry. If you do not, you are immediately disqualified. And by the way, 80% of the applicants don't qualify for asylum. The other thing we need to do is let's just take away from the DOJ the adjudication of asylum cases. Let's give that to the Border Patrol. Let's quadruple the number of judges so that they don't come in and say, okay, appear for your court date in 2 months, because they will not come back.
So speed up the process.
Speed up the process. And we just, look, the only kind of judge you really need is like a magistrate level judge who is a little bit ahead of a lawyer, and you put them on the border. If you need 4 times or 6 times, get it done so that the adjudication is done while you wait, so that you know if there's 80% that aren't qualifying, you know they can go right back to Mexico. And that stay in Mexico policy really needs to be fully reinstated.
Social Security has been an issue that we've been talking about for years, that maybe it wouldn't be solved or it would run out.
Sure.
But we are looking 10 years down the road now and knowing that cutbacks will have to happen unless something changes. How do you solve that problem?
Well, this is, nobody wants to talk about entitlements, right? And yet that's 2/3 of the budget problem.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about it. This is important. If you're in the Social Security system, or you're near to that age, if you're in your 50s and moving towards that area, we have a covenant with those people to say you're going to be okay. We're going to take care of you. But if you're 20 and 30 years old, I really like what Warren Buffett said when somebody asked him and said, "Hey, where would you tell your wife to put her money?" And he said, we would. I'd tell you, put it in an index fund and just leave it alone. Just keep putting that in every month. If you were to do that with Social Security payments, you'd have a lot more money at the end than you would if you put it into Social Security. We also are going to have to move the retirement age. First of all, actuarially, we're living longer. And there is, for a 20 or 30-year-old, there is no reason that that person should feel entitled to retire at 65 or 66, whatever that age is. Add a couple more years there. That's actuarially sound. And most people are more satisfied with their life when they're actually working anyway. So I think it actually solves a couple of problems.
We have very little time. I'm trying to figure out what else we want to get to here. Going back to the economy and inflation, we haven't seen, I guess, the drop in the economy that a lot of people were expecting at this point. What else can be done for families right now who are saying, you know, they're struggling? Let's say we have loans that are coming due again, the student loans that haven't been there for a few years, or just everything costs more right now. What can be done to help families right now, even in the next session of Congress, to maybe start making changes that people can actually fill in their pocketbook or their taxes or what they're paying out? Well,
look, first of all, let's just understand that when COVID hit, we had a bailout plan for the economy, and that was probably appropriate. But the next two that were passed during the Biden administration are completely unnecessary. We were paying people to stay home. We have this new infrastructure bill. We have $3.9 trillion that hasn't even been spent yet. We need to stop spending that money, because the definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. So stop pumping dollars into the economy that don't belong there. And you know, the interest rates to buy a home, it's almost impossible. I think the thing, if you want me to be really candid about what people can do right now to make a difference, and I'll look at the camera to say this, and that is you need to vote. And you need to vote for the party and the people that are concerned about these pocketbook issues. You know, in this race, there's three of us in the Republican race. We have one candidate who voted for Biden, which delivered all of the high inflation, delivered all of the interest rate increases, delivered all of the energy price increases. And you have the other candidate, Celeste, who did not vote at all. In fact, not in 4 of the last 6 elections. So you need to hire somebody for Congress that's really serious about the responsibility of who's going to be in the White House, who's going to manage the congressional duties of reducing the speed of growth in the state of government.
We have 60 seconds left. We have a presidential debate happening tonight. What are you watching for? What do you want to see?
This is exciting. I mean, first of all, the great news is Republicans have a great field to choose from. We have at least 6 people who are spectacular in terms of their abilities. Any one of them could walk into the White House and be an effective president. So for people to, this gets back to, you need to vote. You need to pay attention to what's being said and what their backgrounds are and how they might contribute to this country. And you know, if I look at the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, I don't see a lot of choices. And so I think it's a great opportunity for Republicans to really rise to the top on this one.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks so much for coming in today, and thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.